What is up YouTube, this is Random Callsign. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about track mods for Assetto Corsa. One of the best things about Assetto Corsa is the modability of the platform, and that allows you to get lots of cars, lots of tracks with lots of quality. In this case, today I'm just going to talk about my favorite 7 tracks for Assetto Corsa. Today I'm not going to talk just about circuits, but also about roads, rally roads, toga roads, and everything like that. So we have a bit of everything here, and you might have good choices for your Assetto Corsa folder. So these are varied, and I think you're gonna like them. The first track I'm going to talk about is one that was recommended by a viewer a few months back. This is Majora Valley Motorsports Park, and it's much different from everything I'm going to talk about today because this track itself, it doesn't exist. This is a fantasy track. It's very inspired by Gran Turismo and Forza tracks, but it doesn't mean it's lower quality. In reality, I was very impressed the first time I set foot in this track because it is a fantasy track, and I wasn't expecting a fantasy track made by a modder that on its spare time to be a very interesting mod like this. You have 3 layouts. You have a sprint version, you have a club layout, which is very short for smaller cars, you have the sprint layout like I talked about, which is a little bigger, and then you have the GP one that will do a figure of 8. Every single one of them are very well made. The meshes are a bit on the smooth side, that's why it's coming on the bottom of the list in my opinion, but everything else, every little detail on the roadside is fantastic. It goes over a bridge that is very well done in my opinion. Now, it's a shame that this track isn't picked up by a lot of people, especially on races. I can understand why, because it can lose the immersion if you are doing a championship and you have names, real names like Mugello, you have Monza and so forth, and then you have Majora Valley Motorsports that nobody knows. Still, it is very believable. All the runoff areas are well done. It is very varied in the types of corners that it does. It has straights, it has S's. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any chicane. It will be good to see a chicane there, but there are, tighter corners on this track. The only thing I think it misses on this track is a bit of changes on the width of it. It's varied pretty much the same all around. It can be quite boring, and the only place it changes is on the straight. Other than that, it will be very boring because there is no difference between one area of the track and the other. It doesn't give a different dynamic in the areas you're running into. The AI is worth mentioning here. They're very competent. The last time I've tried, admittedly, Majora with the AI was a few months ago, and this was before version 1.14 AI, which changed everything. They were very competent, even giving me a rough time around some areas where they try to compete with you. So all in all, this is a really excellent track, and I hope to see it more often in racing and online. So the next track I'm going to talk about will be the first road track for Assetto Corsa in this list, and this is called SP237 Costa Open Road. This is a real road in Italy, located near the town of Brescia. This mod has a few layouts, including a loop layout that you might have a bit of trouble with if you can use with the AI or even if yourself. Of course, because it is a loop layout in a road, if you go to the other side of the road, you'll have, a wrong way sign, but you can actually modify Assetto Corsa to stop doing the wrong way sign by doing like a blank file or something. But other than that, it works in a loop. It has a north and a reverse layout, and this is one of those roads that if you really feel bored, you can pick up a road car and just go around, just stroll a bit with the car and just drive. Costa is best appreciated with road cars, stuff like Porsches. Alfa Romeo 4C goes very well here. The mesh, even though they say it's high detail, I think it's way too smooth for a real road of this type. But other than nitpicking on the road meshes, this is an excellent road track because of the expansive views, and that's why I mentioned this type of track to be really good to relax. It has expansive views. You look over the hills, everything is very well detailed on the roadside, but bear in mind this is a very taxing track for Assetto Corsa. If you have a lower computer, a lower performance computer, you might have a lot of issues with it, especially if you bring the AI, which is this track is compatible with. If you bring AI into equation, you might see some issues, some stuttering. I happen to have it on my old computer, now I don't, but still it's something to warn you about. One thing that is worth mentioning, in real life, Costa is not only known for being a place for petrol heads, but also used as a hill climb place. There are some hill climb championships sometimes here, and this track, because it is a road track of this type, it's wonderful to use with also with the faster car, not just road cars. But if you use something with a rally car, or even if you want to be really bonkers, if you want to use the Audi S1 Quattro, the hill climb version here, man, it's fantastic. It's a lot of work, and I cannot recommend it enough. Next track, and I think everybody would expect me to talk about this road. This is Okayama Downhill. The version I'm talking about, it will be talking about, is Okayama 2017. There is a difference between the Okayama you might find somewhere and Okayama 2017. In the previous video, I talked about the differences between the two. My selection is always going to be Okayama 2017. It's the one I run the most. But other than that, the reason why I recommend this track, it's not only because I play a lot in it, but there is a reason why I play a lot in it. First of all, it's the layout. The layout of this track is really great. There's a mix of many type of corners, including S corners, fast corners, hairpins. You also have small little tricks like gutters that you can explore to get some seconds out of your run downhill. And this, of course, is a track that suits very well Japanese cars, namely the 8060 RX-7. Every car that comes in a Japanese LC, it's very suited well. The AI also works in this track, but bear in mind it's going to be a little tricky in the beginning if you use more than 2 or 3 cars, and if the cars have different types of power. What ends up happening in the beginning of a race against the AI is that they launch and they turn either right or left depending on the side they are, and you can actually crash into them because your launch will always be better than AI's launch, and they are also very tightly packed in the beginning. So be careful, understand that you can use the AI, but they are not really good in the launch. The AI racing isn't very good. I've done a test on that too, and the main reason is sometimes the AI runs wide and there are guardrails around most of the track. That means a crash is going to happen. If that already happens a lot, especially online, let alone with the AI that doesn't understand that the guardrail is there. There are 3 layouts in this mod. You have the downhill, which is the typical one. You have the uphill, and also there's a drift version which will start you in the middle of the track somewhere. I don't understand why they called it drift when they should have called something else like free roam. In short, I think this is one of those tracks that everybody should have in Assetto Corsa, especially if you want to do some toge in Assetto Corsa or you want to start it. This would be the perfect place to start because it's the most popular track in the Assetto Corsa lobbies for this type of race. Also, if you're not into racing in toges itself, the track also offers you some varied types of corners, and it's actually very challenging going downhill. So even if you don't like toge, the layout is interesting and it's good for you as well. Next up was a total surprise for me the first time I tried it. For many reasons, this is Riverside International Raceway. I found this track a surprise because I didn't know it for sure. I never heard about Riverside up until the first time I've tried it. I'm normally not into American types of tracks because they are very boring. They always follow the same type of pattern in corners, but this track blew me out of the water for many reasons. One of them is the layout is pretty cool, the meshes are decent, and the roadside objects are very well done. There is a lot of detail around the track, and I think it's very well done overall technically. This track was closed back in 1989. I never heard of it, and apparently it ran Formula 1, IndyCar, NASCAR, and a few other types of races. And I find it really fascinating because a lot of people went into the trouble of trying to recreating this track to the utmost detail. There are stuff around the track, roadside objects like I mentioned, but the type of tarmac that is on the track, you can see there are some different details on the tarmac. It's not the same. It doesn't seem to grip the same, and the meshes are fantastic. I've run here with older cars and newer cars as well, and I think older cars, especially American cars, run very well here. Fortunately, I'm seeing this track online more and more. Sim Racing Systems runs this track very frequently in their championships and their cups. I've used this with Porsches, namely the Porsche GT3 RS, and it was fantastic. But once again, like I said, the best type of cars here are actually cars with soft suspension, so namely Americans. This track mod will give you 4 layouts. It will give you one called the Spike, a NASCAR one, which is more of a square rounded one. You have a short version and a long version. The difference between the short and long version is just a corner. In the short version, you run off for a straight, and in the short there is an S corner just before the end corner. I find the short version more interesting because of that S corner. It's actually pretty nice. You go downhill, you go uphill first, then you turn left, and then it's already an S corner to your right, so it's hard to try to run the car around, and it can upset the balance of the car very much. I've tried it with Porsches. It can be very tricky for cars like the Porsches because it can definitely upset the balance of the car, and the car will try to spin around. One last point about Riverside is that the AI is really good here. I wasn't expecting that. I've tried it with the latest version of Assetto Corsa, so this is post version 1.14. The AI is fast even at a lower difficulties, around 95 to 98%. So if you want to run around this track and train against AI, they'll be very good and you'll have a good time. So next up, it's gonna be a rally stage by Simtrax. First of all, little disclaimer, I'm a beta tester for Simtrax, so take that into consideration. This is by far my favorite track, rally track in Assetto Corsa. Simtrax does great rally tracks, but this one for me is the best out there. It's, like they say, probably the deadliest road in Assetto Corsa, and I tend to agree. There are many reasons that quote is true. One of them is, well, Assetto Corsa doesn't have a co-pilot, but the other reason is actually the layout. This is a really old track. The track is narrow. There are lots of little small things that can kill you anywhere. There are huge drops if you miss a corner. That can happen. This is basically a GOAT track for about 14-15 kilometers. But what is astounding on this track, and a lot of tracks admittedly in Simtrax, is the attention to detail, not just on the roadside objects like people, buildings and vegetation, but on the meshes. The meshes of the track or the pavement is very varied in this track. There are areas where the tarmac seems to be newer, but other zones where the tarmac is really bumpy, and you can feel it definitely on the force feedback. So there's a lot of detail there, and it becomes really hard to try to understand where the grip might be. Like most road tracks from Simtrax, this is very taxing on your computer. It's very heavy on your computer. I've run it before in an old computer, my older i5-3570K. It was fine, but it is noticeable that it's gonna tax some computers more than others, so bear that in mind when you run into this track. There are a couple of layouts in this version of Prairie Grossa. There's, one that is Prairie Grossa to the other town, and the other one is the other way around. And I do have recommendations for cars on this track. Use the Toyota Celica, or my personal favorite is actually the Ford RS 1600. It's a blast. It's really hard to drive here, but it's absolutely a blast. So older cars on this track will be fantastic because this is a really high detailed mesh. There's a lot of information in the meshes, a lot of information in the road, and the older cars actually respond better than even the Celica or mods. I don't like the mods running here because they feel too digital, and the Ford RS 1600, I think it's the perfect car for this GOAT track. Long story short, I think Grossa is an essential track. It's a difficult track. I'm not going to recommend this if you're new into Assetto Corsa rallying, but this is one of those tracks that you really should have in your computer. Donington is probably the most popular track in United Kingdom. I would even say more than Silverstone, because this is a track that is used in BTCC. It's used a lot for track days, so there is more contact with the people using the track rather than Silverstone, which is mostly MotoGP, I guess, in Formula 1. As for the mod itself rather than the track, this mod is extremely well done. The developer has been spending the last 2.5 years doing small upgrades, incremental upgrades, and updates to the track, so there's a lot of details we can look around the track to see. In terms of immersiveness, in this list, this is the most immersive track here, and the reason is why everything seems to be alive in the roadside. There are small details that make all the difference. Donington is near an airport, and sometimes you'll see passenger plane going up, and sometimes you'll even see fighter jets going up above you. So it's really interesting to have these small details making everything more immersive to your experience. The track itself is fantastic, well done. The meshes are fantastic. There's a lot of bumps. The elevation changes are really good, so you can see that the developer spent a long time there, and for me it's one of my favorites layouts in racing generally, especially going downhill. There are really fast S-bends, and it can be really tricky to balance the car to do a really fast right-hander side. I think it's turn 5 after going downhill. I talked a bit about the immersion on this track, and some things really sell this track, like the flags. The flags do move, and then you have the clock sign in the beginning. You have a small clock and the starting straight. All the details around this track are extremely well done. It's fantastic for racing. I've raced here in SRS and in other events as well. The AI, I wouldn't say it's good here. The start of the AI is really bad. They go into the middle of the road, so it can be really tricky because you will launch faster than the AI. But other than that, after launching the AI, it works actually pretty well, pretty surprisingly well. This track is becoming more and more popular in Assetto Corsa. I used it in SRS and in other events, and I think you'll be seeing this more and more often in the lobbies and public lobbies as well. The last track in this list is Okayama International Circuit. Some of you might recognize this track from iRacing. Is one of the basic iRacing tracks that comes with the basic license. But now finally we have a proper version that is recreated into Assetto Corsa. The developer of this track has done this mod specifically for Assetto Corsa, and he says in the race department page that he spent the last 9 months trying to get all the pieces of information to create the track as it is. There are 3 layouts in this mod. You have the GP, which is the full version. You have the Piper, that after turn 1 it turns into the right. There will be a small cut into your right side and goes directly into the last part of the track. And there is Formula Drift, which is a part of the Piper circuit. One thing that is unique to this track, and I really find it interesting, is that you can really drive on the roads around the track. So it's not just the roads, you can actually visit the village that is there around the track. You can use the secondary roads that gives access to the track as well. So that's something that is really interesting and unique to this track. As for the track itself, I'm really lost for words of how good it can be and actually how good it is. I've tried the iRacing one and I'm really confused. I think this one can be better in terms of details. So this track is fantastically done. The only thing it doesn't have is the laser scan, but I'm not even sure if it matters with the type of detail it has on the meshes. It's really high quality. There's a lot of different elevations in the track and you feel it on your force feedback. And to be fair, I don't recall many differences between this and the iRacing version. I think they're very equated in terms of quality of the mesh and quality of the track itself. In terms of quality of the roadside objects, I think the Assetto Corsa version is better, and in general I think the Assetto Corsa version is better. I know some people from iRacing, they are from the iRacing community, will say I'm stupid. Yeah, probably I am, but this is my recollection between these two tracks. I think Okayama International Circuit mod is very well done for Assetto Corsa, and I hope to see this more often in racing online. This track also brings 36 pit slots, so you can have up to 36 racers or 36 AI. I've tried it with about 30 AI and it works pretty well in my computer, but if you're going that high, you should have a decent computer to run all of this AI, otherwise you're gonna have problem. The AI is actually really competent here, and believe it or not, in some situations it kind of seemed that the AI behaved very similarly to some of the racers I've come across in iRacing in this track, which is something really interesting. I wasn't really expecting that. Long story short, this is an excellent addition to Assetto Corsa. It's an excellent mod, and this is another one of those tracks that you should have on your racing folder. Here you have it, guys, my recommendations for tracking Assetto Corsa. If you have other recommendations or tracks that I didn't talk about and you like it very much, leave them in the comments. I'm sure somebody will pick it up and probably I'll check them out as well. Also, if you like this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, check my Facebook page, and I'll see you next time.